they kind of begin to take on a life of their own. And, sometimes, all the choices don't really come from me. They arise from the work as I'm.
Today's guest is Myles Roznowski, the artist behind our current exhibition, Symbols of the Sublime. In the exhibition, Roznowski attempts to visualize the nature of patterns through a range of media on a visually encompassing scale. We talked with him today about the formation of his vision for these pieces and the exhibition as a whole. Myles Roznowski, thank you for joining me here on the Temple Arts podcast. We've really been enjoying your exhibition, Symbols of the Sublime, here at the Saginaw Art Museum. Guests have responded to it very favorably and with good reason. So I guess I'd like to start and jump right in and have you maybe describe a little bit of the processes or tools that you use to construct these incredible pieces. We get a lot of questions here at the museum of, well, how did he do that? And so maybe we'll start with a process question and love to hear more about how that works for you.
Sure. Well, yeah, thanks for the introduction. And man, I'm also overjoyed to just be a part of your museum and have this exhibit here as well. So yeah, I guess the process started off with coming up with an idea for the whole show, especially for this one in particular. My background is in the sign industry, so I'm kind of used to having a vague idea, from a client or whoever of like what they want and being able to construct something completely custom, from just 2D design. So for this show, first, obviously I had to see the space, see what would be practical as well as impactful. And once I had a few sketches, that I liked, on my computer drawn up, I was able to draw the exhibit space on my computer and kind of lay out where these pieces would go and get an idea of scale and all that as well. And once I had, the general idea down, came the hard part, which was figuring out how to construct, each and every single one of these very unique pieces. And it can sometimes require just a lot of thinking before you even begin to construct these pieces. And I wanted to be confident from the start that I would pull off each piece properly and it would be light enough to hang on a wall and have a good presentation as well. So the inspiration for each of these, I guess, stems from, it just sketches on my computer or scrap materials I have lying around from my sign work. I love turning pieces that would, otherwise be thrown away into a piece of art. And once I start, constructing these pieces from either, the designs that I have or just from scrap art, they kind of begin to take on a life of their own. And, sometimes, all the choices don't really come from me. They arise from the work as I'm building it. And, I just have to be open to the possibilities and just know when not to force it and embrace some of the unexpected things that happen. But for this show in particular, I had to be very careful with my process in time management. I created an assembly line of sorts for all of these. I think it was 6 pieces that I created. So every piece had to be designed at the same time, had to be routed, programmed and cut at the same time, which I use a CNC router for that. They all to be constructed and painted and, put together all at the same time. So every piece had to go perfectly during construction in order for this to work. And of course there are problems along the way, but, I tend to keep an attitude that every process has a solution. It's kind of part of being an artist, learning how to fix your mistakes. So yeah, with this show, I guess, it was definitely a challenge with the time constraints. Everything had to just, fall in line. And I also had a broken hand during the whole thing at the same time too. So that added to the challenge.
just one more thing, right?
Yeah. I think I'm just addicted to problem solving sometimes.
Well, it's interesting to hear a little bit about how it's sort of for this body of work, there's certainly that art if in itself, but also the art of the production. And it's almost like there's a combination of those things working together, almost a mechanical element in terms of the mechanics of timing things out and producing this body of work, along with sort of that vision that you start with to make all the pieces work and come together and be cohesive. And that's really neat to learn.
You have to be a designer, an engineer, CNC router, fabricator, painter, lighting specialist. It's kind of in the sign industry, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. So a lot of that just ends up in my artwork.
I'd love to hear more about your use of light in the pieces that you've included in the exhibition. I think that's something that's maybe a little bit different, certainly for our museum. But with the advent of new kinds of lighting with LED lights and things of that sort, can you describe more about your use of light and combining light with the artwork itself?
Yeah. Well, again, I got used to working with LEDs throughout my work, and I really loved all the possibilities that they can create. I love the options that we have to to use LEDs now, and they can be programmed in so many different ways, and you have all sorts of colors. So I really love to experiment with lighting as well, and I guess I use it because it makes it more practical art, I would say. It's good night lighting, it's mood lighting. It makes it a little more interactive, and it makes it necessary to see in person too, I think. I like making artworks that aren't easily replicated or, can be reproduced in a print of any sort of way. It kind of reinforces that you have to see this in person. And, it's hard to even know what to call these, kind of light pieces. They're not paintings. It's in some way, the opposite of a painting, where, as a painter tries to portray a three-dimensional work onto a 2D surface, I'm almost doing the opposite, where I take a 2D design and try to bring it into a three-dimensional reality. And that kind of includes lighting, and it all just, stems from a non-dimensional idea, which I find fascinating. I got used to, I guess it's almost a specialty of mine, I would say, is bringing a 2D design into life. Because I keep saying this, but again, in the sign industry, you have to work with designers who just have a 2D design and they want it dimensional and impactful, and you're just looking for ideas. So I got really good at just taking any design, whether it being, in the case for this show, just patterns or geometry, and turning it into a 3D reality, almost like wall sculptures in a way.
So speaking a little bit to the symmetry involved in your works and that repetition of pattern, it's very interesting how there's a complexity to the construction that you've described and the production of the individual pieces, but in a way that repetition sort of binds each of the pieces together, and like if you just look at one part and then you multiply it out and rearrange it and move it around, you have your whole. But I'd love to hear sort of more of your thought behind the part and the whole when you're designing the pieces and when you're putting them together.
Like as the show as a whole, or just the piece as a whole?
I guess just the piece as the whole.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They start, like I said, I guess from a two-dimensional, design on a computer, and then it just takes a lot of, I guess, just thinking and visualization. Okay, what could this be with my tools and capabilities that I have on hand? How could I take this to its fullest potential? And I like working with geometry because it's universal. Each person can kind of interpret it in a different way. It's left to their imagination, because symbols are fluid. They're capable of interacting with the conscious and subconscious minds. It's really interesting to hear what others interpret from some of my work. And in most cases, I haven't even figured out what the meaning is yet. But for me, it's almost impossible to know what the meaning of each of my works are right off the bat. I just don't work that way. It's more of a feeling to just capture and produce something in the moment, and then figure out what it means after I've reflected on it for a while.
Yeah, I think it's neat to see the way that you're using like these raw elements of art, form and shape and color, and taking those raw elements and creating these pieces, in a lot of, and I suppose a similar way that you're taking sort of the raw materials, and whether that be foam or wood or acrylic, and taking those raw elements. It's almost this combination of both those art elements and those raw material elements.
Yeah, it's just like I said, just taking their things to their fullest potential, what they could be. Just in like those materials you described, that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from as well. Like just working with those, I just constantly think, okay, what could this be? How could we make this look super cool? I just like to, again, just bring materials to their fullest potential and then figure out the meaning of them, afterwards. So that's why I love working with just designers, because, they already have like the artwork in place. I just have to figure out how to create it. I'm more of a problem solver and a maker.
Did you start, in your artistic journey as a maker in a way, in this sense, or did you start more in a two-dimensional space? Can you describe that?
To be honest, well, I guess I didn't even think I was going to be an artist, to be honest. I never had an interest in it until maybe my second year in college. I grew up in it. My grandfather was an artist and my dad was an artist, and had all the potential there. But I was a math major for the 2 years in college, my first 2 years in college, which is where I think a lot of the geometry comes from, are like mathematical equations and things that line up perfectly, and again, problem solving. So I think that math led me into the work that I do now. I like tinkering and just time consuming things. But as I was going to college, I started working in the sign shop in Midland, and realized I had some, technical ability with building things, and, just working with X-Acto knives and power tools and being able to, be precise. And so just working there, I started making some of my own little art pieces, in their design work. And then I just transitioned into full on, art school at the same time. And so I was simultaneously working at the art, at the sign studio, as well as being in art school. And I finished that. I got my bachelor's in fine art. Went abroad for a few years, and then came back and started taking over my grandfather's old sign business, and which was, he had a home studio. So now I'm able to just make my art inside. And I took over his home studio so I can make my artwork and sign work, because it was kind of just set up for that. It kind of just, life worked out in a way that this just became me.
Looking towards the future, do you feel like there's an evolution in your thought about how you want to continue to make pieces similar to the ones that we have in the exhibition, or have it evolve from where it's at now into something else? A lot of these pieces are fairly large. Do you have any concept of changing the scale of your work, either going larger or perhaps even smaller? I'd love to hear about sort of some of your thought process, if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, sure. So I constantly need to make something different. I feel like, it's I guess it's not a necessary thing that I think about, but I just become uninterested in making the same thing twice, So I think I constantly need to figure out how to make something new. And so I think my pieces will constantly, they just keep evolving. And, the more ideas I get, the more inspired I am by different materials and things that arise. I'll constantly be making newer and better things within, my fullest capabilities at that time and moment. I I used to have this concept, whenever I would make something new, I would be like, man, I'm never going to make anything as cool as this. But it's totally the opposite. You just keep making better and better things, I think. But as far as going like smaller scale or larger scale, I don't know if I could do much larger if I want to stress myself that much. But smaller scale, I'm totally not opposed to. I actually, if I had more time before the show opened, I would have put in a couple of smaller pieces that I just had from scrap materials from the larger pieces, So that's usually where my small artwork comes from, is just other scrap materials, either from my sign work or my other like larger artwork. But as far as like just starting a project off with small pieces, I don't know. I feel like my time is better spent making something really impactful. If I'm gonna really put my time and thought into a new art piece. So I guess the smaller ones are more of like little bonus pieces. If I have materials lying around.
Yeah, well, that's it's really interesting. I can only imagine that the bonus pieces would be equally brilliant to the larger ones.
I have a few of them around our gallery, and they're some of my favorites. They turn out really, just funny or unexpected too. Because they're just little bonuses. So yeah, you never know.
Well, Myles, thank you again for allowing us to show your work here at the Saginaw Art Museum and taking some time to describe more about your process and more about the background of Symbols of the Sublime. We'll look forward to hosting your show through the first part of September, and look forward to seeing you continue to grow in your career.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for the opportunity. It's been great talking with you today. And, I'm definitely going to be sending my friends there before it ends. So I'm glad people have gotten an experience to see what I can do in the community. And hopefully it grows from there.
Thank you for listening to the Temple Arts Podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and making a donation to the arts through SaginawArtMuseum.org or TempleTheater.com. This will allow us to continue to bring enriching program to Saginaw and beyond.